we have a bit of a big topic to discuss today, and I think it might be time to just segue right into that. And
I forgot
they're
we were
not at the
doing
top of
that.
the conference, so we might just postpone them like 2-3 minutes or so. But should we talk about the biggest X factor? I think that's the name of the stream, the biggest X factor on every relevant in a contending standpoint NBA team. I honestly like I put
Yeah,
one down. I put one down for like the Wizards, the Pacers, like the Jazz and the Pelicans. But personally,
They'll
I'm
be
like
briefly mentioned.
I don't think anybody on any of these rosters is gonna be like, yeah, nah, I'm the guy who's gonna take this team from not doing nothing to like, oh, we can win. I don't know. It was like
or if they even
which
make
guy
it.
plays well, they can beat anybody. So I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
They're there, they'll be mentioned, but unfortunately, to the fans of those teams that are not at the top of your respective conferences, your time for NBA content is unfortunately at a low point for the next couple months.
Don't worry. Off season, we got y'all. We
Off
got y'all.
season, we got y'all for sure. And if I stick to my schedule and don't not post videos again, I do plan on covering said teams during the postseason again this year. So it's not all without hope. But we will start with said top teams, and we'll start from the top of the Eastern Conference. We'll start with you, Gabe. Who is your X factor for the Milwaukee Bucks?
I think he's on the thumbnail. I think he might be on the thumbnail. I think my answer for this is Chris Middleton. I think we've seen this team in their run of success being at the top of the East. Those late game moments, man, when they're in a close game, that's your guy. That's the guy who he's going to take the big shot with like 10 seconds left. And a lot of the time, he makes it. Last year, when they went out against the Celtics, he wasn't playing. What did everybody say? If Chris Middleton was there, they probably would have won. And there's a fair amount of like, I hate to do it as like an X Factor guy, but there are a fair amount of guys on this list that are like a team's like second best player. But I think for me, when I think of like X Factor, it's like it's on how this guy plays, or versus like Chris Middleton last year was more like if he plays. Which I'm not going to say Chris Middleton has like a perfect track record, but you know what I mean. His play really could be the thing that goes out and gets this team a series, and like if they go 7 against Boston. So I had to give him the nod here.
Can't say I didn't think about him. I'm going in a little bit of a different direction though. It's more of like a group of players, and it's their shooters. It's their 3-point shot. They One of the burdens that they also had last postseason, outside of Chris Middleton not playing, was they could not just hit consistently from the perimeter. Like Brook Lopez, I think didn't hit a three until like Game 7. Like he was shooting so bad in that series. Bobby Portis wasn't shooting that good. Connaughton, Grayson Allen, those guys have to be able to knock down shots. They've kind of all collectively struggled for the most part this season, just compared to like how they've been in their career. In the playoffs, they got to step it up. They got to ramp it up a little bit because when the Bucks are hitting shots, they're damn near unbeatable. For most teams, like they will run through most of the league if they are hitting those shots consistently from the perimeter. So that's my biggest X factor for them is just their shooters being good 3-point shooters in the postseason.
Definitely. Like you say, when their shooters hit, they're very hard to beat. There's no doubt about that. I had Chris Middleton as well. If he stays healthy, if he can get back to himself, like you mentioned, Gabe, he's the key for them down the stretch of games. And if he can continue to contribute as he has in the past, then they're going to be pretty darn tough to beat. Moving on to the 76ers, we'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your X factor for them?
Kind of talked about it earlier. It's James Harden.
Yeah.
We discussed it a lot. If he can elevate his game to being, kind of like James Harden, like we know, they're going to be a tough out for sure. But if he just kind of stays the same or even regresses, then we could see them like maybe get bounced or really get beat up by a Celtics or a Bucks. Like that's definitely a possibility. But it's James Harden, man. I don't really know any other direction to go.
James Harden. I think I would just kind of hate putting the best player on a team in most circumstances. So I don't want to say like Embiid, like, oh, Embiid's health is like or anything like that. But Yeah, James Harden, man. I think Tyrese Maxey will elevate his game. I think PJ, he's a known commodity. He's going to do what he does. And I think anybody on the roster beyond that, I don't think you should expect Tobias Harris has played to be the thing that takes this team from losing a series to winning a series. I think if you're putting your eggs in that basket, you're probably fighting a losing battle. And anybody beyond that, I love a DeAnthony Melton, great bench player. I don't think he'll be a good piece, but I don't think he's taking you from another second round out to win the NBA Finals. I really think for this team, their road is James Harden, at least showing flashes of being that Houston James Harden, and they can get really far.
Yeah, I agree. I thought about giving Tobias Harris some love here, and honestly, I was more so put against him being here by the fact that I just don't think he'll get the opportunity to be that type of an X factor more so than he can't be. But like you guys mentioned, like we talked about earlier, James Harden's going to be the biggest key to what this 76ers team can do come the playoffs. Moving on to the Boston Celtics, who would be your X factor, Gabe?
Boston Celtics, for them, might be a bit of, I don't know if this is an odd pick or not. I went with Malcolm Brogdon. I think their top two guys both have their moments where they're really on, and sometimes they're really off. Occasionally they might be right in the middle. And, there can be a lot of discourse about that. But this team last year went to the finals. So when I'm thinking X factor, it's okay, that was going to put them over the top to where they go from making it to winning it. So who was the biggest guy they added in the offseason? It was Malcolm Brogdon. So let's see if that addition, especially him running with their bench unit, maybe get himself into some closing lineups. Maybe he plays there right now. Overall, if he can really show out, this is a guy that's averaged 20 points in the NBA. Now, that was 3 years ago. Those Pacers teams he was on were not making the playoffs much since then, so we haven't really seen him in the playoffs in a while. But if he can come out, play some really good basketball for them, and be the new addition that we hope he can be in the big-time moments, could really switch things for this team.
I like that pick. I think you can go with either one of the Celtics guards, whether it's Brogdon or Derek White. I went with Robert Williams. Sort of a health-related thing. If he's available, he's so important to this team, both defensively and what he brings offensively, both whether they run offense through him out of the high post or just him as a lob threat, as a screener. He just provides so much for this team that you see the difference when he's not on the floor or when he's just not playing at all. So he's probably just outside of Tatum getting back to himself, that is the guy that has to be available because we know what he brings to the table when he's out there.
Definitely. Both very good picks. Him being healthy is going to be really important. I did have the other Celtics guard. I went with Derek White here. It's just continuing to play his good defense, be such a good playmaker. And we saw last year when he really gets going on offense in the playoffs, it can be the difference maker in a game or two for the Celtics. So I don't think this postseason is going to be much different other than the fact that he won't be relied on quite as much thanks to the addition of Brogdon, but still going to be a really important piece and can definitely swing a few games for them either way come any given series. Moving on to the Cavaliers. I'll ask you first, Tyrik, who is your X factor for the Cavs this postseason?
Tough team to figure out. They've kind of been that way all season. I'm going to go with Garland because this being his first taste of real playoff basketball is going to be key. We already know Donovan Mitchell's going to do what Donovan Mitchell does in the playoffs. We've never seen him with a guard that can offset what he does, just be another option. If he can step up to the plate, they can make a little bit of noise, but if he kind of diminishes, then it's just going to be kind of a rerun of Utah in such a way where Donovan has to create all of the offense. So Darius Garland is probably the next most important piece.
For me, I went a different direction, but sort of similar reasoning. I went with the guy in the front court getting his first taste of playoff experience, and I went with Evan Mobley. I think anytime you have a young player like that who's such a big part of your roster, there's some players that rise up in the playoffs, and there's some players that fall off. Now, Evan Mobley, he has the type of skill set to where I do think he can go in and succeed. Good defender, good versatile defender, and he has another great defender in Jared Allen next to him to kind of take off some of that kind of big man pressure. But still, at the end of the day, if you're going to be a guy that's one of the core pieces of this team, I know Donovan Mitchell's going to up his game in the playoffs. I think Jared Allen's role is so secure that he can just continue to excel in that, especially with the passer as talented as Darius Garland. And then Darius Garland, while there may be tough, especially for a point guard in his first playoff experience, I think at the same time, him having a Donovan Mitchell to kind of lean on and play off of is going to open up his game a lot when you see a guy like Donovan Mitchell who's known for going nuclear in the playoffs. I think it just opens up the game a little bit more, and because he's so dynamic, things may be just a bit tougher on Evan Mobley, especially in an East that's loaded with front court players.
Definitely fair. Definitely fair. I went with the option that fully allows Garland and Mitchell to have their games open up, and I went with their shooters because I think that's going to be the most important part of what the Cavs can do this postseason. If Rubio and LeVert and Osman and Okoro can't hit threes, they're probably toast because defenses are just going to be able to key in on Garland, key in on Mitchell. They're going to be really limited for what they can do on the offensive end. If those guys can start making defenses respect them a little bit, make you guard Cedi Osman, make you guard Karis LeVert, no one's going to guard Okoro, so he's just going to have to hit them and make them pay. I think that's going to be the biggest key for them to make sure that Garland and Mitchell actually have some room to operate and they don't just see themselves blitzed on every single possession.
I didn't pick that because I knew you would say something about it.
Definitely a good call because, that's the biggest thing that I've harped on for them all year. So definitely a good call. Moving on to the New York Knicks. We'll start with you, Gabe. Who is your X factor for the Knicks this season?
So I want to preface this with the fact that I really wanted to say Josh Hart because since the trade, the biggest thing we said, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, was that in Portland this year, he was shooting like 30% from three. And we were like, hey, we know he can rebound. He can do some good wing defense. But if he starts hitting his threes like we've seen him do before, he can be a special acquisition for this team. He's went there. His percentage is up 26%. He is shooting 56% from three as a New York Knick. I don't expect 56% to last, but even if you find the exact middle ground between 56 and 30, you're still shooting well above 40% on in the playoffs. So if he can do that, plus doing the things he already did on the other end of the floor, he can be really well for them. However, even after all that, and this is why I was so split, I went with RJ Barrett. And the reason for that is Jalen Brunson's been real steady. Julius Randle's had his bounce back year, just had probably one of the best games of his career in a loss. But RJ Barrett's been that guy who we see flashes all the time, but he's always been one of those models of inconsistency. And so if he can step up and play at his best, this Knicks team could really give a first-round matchup a scare. But if he's playing sort of some of that inconsistent ball where he's not playing to the best of his ability, they might have a really tough time because theoretically he should be the third option, the third best player on this team. But if he's not playing to that, they might be toast against those top four.
Yeah, I want to say RJ too, but I think they could get away with him depending on how Josh Hart plays, Quentin Grimes plays. They could maybe get away with him being a little subpar. I'm going with Julius Randle because last time we saw him in the playoffs, he was the number one guy, and he wasn't getting much production from RJ Barrett, right? Now you got Jalen Brunson. We've seen Jalen Brunson in the playoffs. We know he's a big-time player when those lights are the brightest. If Julius Randle can't step up now, then it's really just a Julius Randle problem. So he's really the important guy. He has to play at that all-NBA caliber level for them to really have a chance. Now, like Gabe said, if RJ Barrett is able to step up his game, that gives them an even better shot. But, Julius Randle has to be kind of elite too because I expect Brunson to be what he is, but Julius Randle really has to elevate his game too.
Definitely. I think either of those guys are really good picks. I went with RJ personally. I think he's just going to be a guy who's going to be, like you said, Gabe, can he be consistent? And that means can he lock in for 30, 36 minutes a night defensively? Can he be a little bit more consistent with his three-point shot? Can he be smart with his drives and not force anything and run into some poor turnovers? I think that's going to be really key for the Knicks. Going to be really key for Randle to show that he can perform in the playoffs too. I think those are the two guys. And even though Brunson hasn't had a ton of playoff experience, we've seen more than enough. Like you said, Tyrik, we know that he's going to get things done come playoff time. Moving on to the Brooklyn Nets. I'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your X factor for the Nets heading into this postseason?
Kind of a weird team to kind of gauge, honestly.
I agree.
Very weird.
This was probably the hardest one.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Spence. I'm gonna go with Spencer Dinwiddie, man. It's just always good to have a lead guard that can make stuff happen. I kind of expect Mikal maybe not to have too much of a drop off. He's been really, really, really good offensively since getting traded. I think just having a guard that you can really trust, which outside of Dinwiddie, who would they really look to provide that lead guard role for them? So he really has to be so consistent, so good for them if they want to make any type of noise in that first round.
Yeah, honestly, this was so hard to make for me because I feel like the biggest thing with this team is like Mikal has come out and shown that he is that dude, for lack of a better term. And it's almost just like you're just waiting to see who becomes the X factor rather than that X factor already existing. So my first thing that I wrote down was Ben Simmons because we know the kind of potential he has. But at this point, it almost seems like too far gone. Plus, from a health perspective, he might not be back in the postseason. It's kind of still questionable whether he will be. Definitely won't be back for the rest of the regular season, per most reports. But then I think I finally settled and I went with Cam. And you can take that either way. You can take that as Cam Johnson or as Cam Thomas because those are two guys that we've seen have really big moments this season. However, also guys that you don't really know what to expect all the time. Cam Johnson's three-point percentage is way down since the trade. Now, is that probably mostly due to quality of looks? I'm sure. But say he starts getting that percentage back up closer to what it was in Phoenix, he could light a team up and really steal you a game or two in the playoffs. Same thing with Cam Thomas. Somehow he goes out and drops like 100 points in 3 games, and then we don't hear his name for weeks. And so what he does and what he brings to the table is such a question mark. I think those are both two guys who it's like, how good are they actually? So I went with them.
I thought about Cam Johnson. I thought about him too.
Definitely. I mean, especially with Cam Thomas, like you say, he is such an extreme definition of an X factor because you quite literally never know what you're getting from him because you don't even know on any given night if he's getting 25 minutes or 0. But I ended up going with Cam Johnson here as well. He's the type of guy who can give you 20, 25 on any given night. And given the fact that they could end up being in the playing conversation, that could be really important for them to have him drop 25 on any given night alongside some production from Bridges. So Dinwiddie's a good show too. I think they're going to need that lead guard play, but Cam Johnson was my pick. Moving on to the Miami Heat. I'll ask you first, Gabe. Who is your X factor for the Heat this postseason?
Starting with Tyler Hero. I think mostly from the perspective of last year, he was like 6th man of the year, had really great scoring numbers all season. And then we got to the postseason, and how great he had been all regular season did not really translate that well. And it led to Jimmy having to really put on the backpack and carry them on offense for a lot of that playoff run. This year, they're really lacking in the depth department, especially when your highest paid guard, Kyle Lowry, he's not playing well this season, like at all. I don't even expect him to be like X Factor level. I cannot trust him at all to be like, especially in the playoffs as a contributor when he's not even really contributing that well in the regular season at this point. So from their guard play, they're really going to need Tyler Hero to actually transition his success into the postseason if they want to have any sort of chance.
Good pick. I think this one's like as clear as day. It's their 3-point shooting. They are probably, I think they're like bottom 3 in the league in 3-point percentage. It's a team that historically is been a pretty good 3-point shooting team. And this season, guys are just not hitting shots. I think they have several guys taking like 4 or 5 attempts a game, and they're all shooting like sub 35%. Like, yeah, I didn't even realize like Max Strus has declined that much as a 3-point shooter until I looked at his numbers. I think he's shooting like 33%. So if they're not able to hit shots at all, it could be a very quick playoff run. Very quick playoff run for them. Even if they even make it, like it could be very quick and easy for whoever they match up with. So they got to be able to knock down shots, just kind of how Devin said about Cleveland. Because if not, teams are going to load up on Jimmy. Then they're going to force Bam to be more aggressive, force Tyler Hero into some tough situations, and it's just not going to, bolt out well for them.
Definitely. They're going to have to hit their shots. I went with a more specific player who needs to hit their shots alongside some other things. I went with Gabe Vincent here. Similar to how Lowry was kind of that guy for them last year as an X factor, Vincent's kind of taken that starting point guard role or the lead guard role more often than not at this point in time. And I think he's going to have to be the guy for them. He's going to have to come in and hit his threes. He's going to have to come in and commit to the defensive end as this Heat team does. And they're going to need some shots for some other guys too, no doubt. Strus is going to have to hit some shots. Kevin Love is going to have to hit some shots better than he has. But while we're here, brief shout out to Jimmy because he is keeping this team alive right now. He's been absolutely ridiculous over the last few weeks.
He's in playoff mode, man. We know what he's about. We know what he does, and he activated it a little early this season.
A lot early.
Very, very early, but unfortunately, this Heat team definitely needs it. Moving on to the Atlanta Hawks. We'll start with you, Gabe. Who is your pick for the Atlanta Hawks X Factor?
For me, it was DeAndre Hunter. He's played a career-high games this season, which, while maybe a little skewed because there have been a lot of shortened seasons since he came into the league, still he did have struggling. He struggled a bit with staying in the lineup, had some injury problems, but this year he's pretty much been in for the majority of the season. He's played well on defense, one of their best defenders, averaging a career high in points as well, so doing it on offense as well. I just think he brings a lot of good things to the table. I think they're a better team when he's there. And for a team that's been super average, maybe he can break out and really, really do something for him.
That's a good pick. This might be weird because it is their best two players, but I think their backcourt kind of has to, get rid of some monkeys off of their back, man, because DeJounte ended up playing last year was kind of poor, and Trae Young really got, game plan for so well by the Miami Heat last year. Those guys got to be on their A games at the same time for them to have any type of shot. First off, making the playoffs, and then making any type of noise in that first round. Those guys have to be really on their best games for them to do anything.
Definitely some good picks, especially considering their seasons this year when Trae's been so up and down and DeJounte hasn't exactly come in and been able to have that impact that he would have wanted to have on their defense. They're going to have to step up to get themselves out of the play-in tournament. I went with DeAndre Hunter as well. I've been a longtime advocate of the fact that he has to be their third best player for them to have success. I'm still on that train. He looks like that this year, partly due to the fact that John Collins looks like a shell of his former self, but partly due to the fact that DeAndre Hunter has just played so well. And I think they're going to have to continue to get that come playoff time, especially on the defensive end, if they're going to have any level of success. We'll go back to the Raptors fan to start us off here. For the Raptors pick, who is your X Factor, Gabe, for the Toronto Raptors this postseason?
See, I literally just changed my mind thinking about it because I feel like this Raptors team has had a lot of inconsistency all year. And now, funnily enough, I think the greatest form of consistency on this team right now might be in that starting center role, which is so ironic because, that was their biggest struggle until the trade deadline. But Jakob Poeltl has been so good for this team. He has been so good. The really keystone moment I think about is that game against Denver where he was just giving it to Jokic all night and kind of, I feel started the exposure of the Denver Nuggets defense. But outside of my positive rant on Jakob Poeltl, I ended up going with Fred VanVleet because he is an all-star level player who for multiple stretches this season has not played like it. We've seen some stretches where he has played very well and been a bit closer to that guy he was last year. But I'm a bit more confident in Pascal doing his thing. And then Gary's always kind of up and down. He was another guy I considered. But I think Fred, for his role on the team, will just have kind of the biggest range of how impactful he can be, especially for a team that kind of lacks in that playmaking area, that lead guard area. His role just becomes so much more important, and him excelling in that is going to be key to them trying to make this push.
Good pick. I'm going to go with OG. we kind of mentioned, I think last week when we recorded, like he'll have games where he's like 4-4 from three, or he'll have a game where he's like 0-6 from three. I just think like his jump shooting overall can really help just open up this team offensively and make it easier for Pascal and for Freddie, especially with Gary Trent not being, consistently in the lineup. I mean, even he's been kind of struggling a little bit recently from what I've been watching. So I think OG is definitely a key piece for them.
Definitely. A lot of picks on this team. I went with Scotty Barnes here for the X Factor for the Raptors. How impactful he can be defensively is going to be a big part of it. And whether this fourth quarter Scotty Barnes that we've seen so much can actually be translated across all 4 quarters of a game, I think is going to be really influential for them come the postseason. But OG's a good pick. Freddie's a good pick. Gary's a good pick. There's a lot of options on this team as to how you want to view their X factor. You could even just pick their shooting as a whole, because there's some nights this team can't shoot from 3 worth anything. It's a lot of picks here.
Any big player on this team, and any player who's not like a top contributor on this team, who is a top contributor on this team outside of like literally Siakam and Pirtle, is like, we don't know. We really have no idea what they're gonna give to us night in and night out. So they're like all X factors. It's one of the. It's like it's dang near almost as hard as the Nets, because the Nets is like like we know Mikhail's gonna hoop, but we don't know who the other guy's gonna be. Like it could really be anybody.
Patty Mills.
Kind of the same thing. kind of the same thing here. Not as many options of who can be that guy, because I do think it's like Scotty, OG, Fred, Gary. Like it should be on most nights one of those.
It's not. Yeah, it's not going to be Chris Boucher.
Gonna be Precious Achua.
With that being said, there's a 25% chance of who your second best player is probably going to be. Because when those players are playing well, they're probably better at peak than Jakob Poeltl. But Jakob Poeltl's so good, man. I could rave about him, and I literally gave them a terrible trade deadline grade because I still don't like the direction very much. Mini tangent. I still don't like the direction that much, but like at the end of the day, he's been a bright spot that can allow me to not just be sad. So
it's definitely a bright spot in a season with very few of those for us fellow Raptors fans. We'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your X factor for the Chicago Bulls this postseason?
Bulls. Pat Bev.
No way.
No, for real though. Not for real. Pat Bev, man. I think they're like 8-4 since he's come to town. Like he's been changing the culture a little bit, man. Just bringing a little different vibe to them, man. So if he can, not how he was a few nights ago where he scored like 14 straight points, was in all those threes, but knock down open shots, stay locked in defensively, maybe help rebound like how Pat Bev always does. Can be definitely a big contributor, man. Like sometimes Pat Bev is like a memeable guy, but he does impact the game. And he's definitely helped the Bulls. So I think he can continue to do that as the season winds down.
So I had heavy consideration for Patrick Beverley, but I decided not to put him for one main reason, and that's because so much of his impact is intangible. I feel like it's more just set. I think he came in. I think he sort of changed that culture, which it's just wild that I'm even like saying this so confidently. But he somehow just like changed the whole demeanor. Like he really just changed the culture of the team. And I don't think that's going to be taken away. Like you put that in a playoff series, if he's hitting shots or not, he's still the same guy in the locker room.
Still an X factor.
He's still doing the same stuff. Though. And I still think that he just like needs to just put in his effort. And I guess when I'm thinking X factor, it's like kind of that volatility of, is he going to give it to you or is he not going to give it to you? We're not exactly sure. And that could change the outcome of this game. I think Patrick Beverley is going to give that to you regardless. Now, is he going to knock down his open shots? Maybe not.
That's what makes him an X factor.
However, I don't know if that's really what he's relied on to do as much. So, but because of that, I'll let you get your counterpoint. I'll let you get your counterpoint.
I was just gonna say, playing type of scenario, they're gonna give Patrick Beverley those shots. I don't want DeMar killing me. I don't want Zach LaVine killing me. Hell, I don't want Vooch posting up. They're gonna give Patrick Beverley those shots. So he's gonna have to knock them down. That's what makes him an X factor.
You do make a good point, and I do really respect the pick. However, I went with the guy that Patrick Beverley lit a fire under, and that is Zach LaVine. Because since they got Patrick Beverley, especially, but really like since All-Star break, since trade deadline, he's been averaging like 30 points per game. Like he's low-key back. And for a lot of this season, Bulls fans especially were not happy with Zach LaVine's play this year. Like they were not high on him at all. Or like, dang, this guy is making this much money for like us to kind of stink and him not to really help with that much. And for a guy who was supposed to be 1A, 1B with DeMar, then DeMar came to town and became like clear one, wasn't really great. But if he can really continue this level of play that he's had more recently, I mean, at that point, what else is to be said? I think this team just instantly becomes much, much better.
Definitely. I think definitely a good pick. His scoring is going to become really important because if you have to treat him like you treat DeMar, then it becomes really tough to defend. I went with Patrick Williams here. I think he has a really big swing factor he hit 6 threes for you in a playing game. You're looking pretty good. And he's a guy who continues to be, for someone who came into the league as a really highly touted 3-and-D wing, I feel like he doesn't really get talked about that much for a guy who still has become a really good 3-point shooter, shooting over 40% from 3 on the year. And if he's the type of guy who, if DeMar does get focused, if LaVine does get focused, Patrick Williams has the opportunity to really have some big nights for them. And I think that upside is what made him my X factor. We will move on to the Indiana Pacers. Moving on to the two teams who still have a shot of making the play-in, who are on the outside looking in. We'll start with you, Gabe. Who was your X factor pick for the Pacers?
My guy, my main man, Benedict Mather-Him. Simply because I don't think this team is making it regardless. I don't even think they're about to be in the play-in. But say they were, it's just kind of that logic of like a rookie in the playoffs, always a giant question mark. I really didn't put too much stock into this pick, I will be honest, because I just don't think they're going to be there. I don't think there is an X factor because I just think they're kind of done. I think Tyrese being out kind of took them out of the running. So, like, I don't think there is a guy that can kind of propel them there. But who's the guy with the most potential to explode and really go somewhere? But also a guy that might have that question mark on his head because of the lack of experience. Benedict Mathurin probably fits the bill the best there, so he's my choice.
Yeah, with Tyrese, it seems like they're kind of monitoring him a little more closely, maybe not trying to play him. Definitely makes them a team that we're not excited about, but I'll just say Miles Turner. He has the potential. He's their now best player, with Tyrese being out. And he's had some big nights this season. He's had some big nights, some big scoring nights. And we know what he can provide as a rim protector, too. So if he's playing his best basketball, he gives them somewhat of a chance to maybe sneak into the play-in.
Definitely some good picks. I went with Miles Turner as well here. Like you say, their best player right now with Tyrese out. Quietly had a career year and could be a swing factor in a play-in game if they somehow get there. Moving on to the Wizards. I had a Bradley Beal trade here, so you can tell where my mind's at. But Bradley Beal, either way, is probably the swing factor for them. I just hope it becomes in an off-court situation and not an on-court situation.
Kuzma going to a bigger city that allows him to travel home and overseas.
No, it's so funny, man. I went with Kuz. I did not put much stock into this decision. The Wizards are not good. I don't think they're, once again, like before, my definition of an X factor. This guy, his play can change the outcome of these games, of your season, of a series. They are not getting a series. They are not getting a play-in game. No matter what happens at this point, I would put a lot of money on that. And if they did get there, they're not going anywhere in it. It would probably be like situation with like when the Hornets made it twice in a row and got blown out by like 40 both times. Like, this team is not good. I know we rag on the Wizards a lot. Nobody is really changing. Nobody is changing the outcome of this season, except honestly, what Devin said, a Bradley Beal trade. Because getting off of that, like, I'm not saying I've done good. Hour 36 in. I haven't said the word because we haven't freaking talked about it yet. I'm still not going to say the word. But that's like a I can't even do it. But until the Wizards get offered that $50 million a year for a player who is probably not top 25 anymore, it's over, man. It's over. It's over.
Hell, I'm gonna be honest. And all respect to Bradley Beal because he's had a great NBA career. He's closer to not being top 50 than he is to being top 25 at this point. For sure.
That means he's not top 37 mathematically.
Hey, they talk about, I know Gabe will like this. They say Seth Rollins cashing in Money in the Bank was the heist of the century. This got to be on the list, man. This bag that Bradley Beal got has to be on the list, bro. Because at least, like, Dame, he's getting a crazy bag, but at least Dame's playing the best basketball of his career. Bradley Beal's just kind of, he's out there having fun.
Yeah, now with Damian Lillard, nah, bro. He did not fleece the Trailblazers because they got what they paid for. They just ain't put shit around it.
Yep. Yeah. Damn. Bradley Beal, top 37 in the league. It's not ridiculous. And that's not crazy.
Well, we'll have a better discussion about that in the top 10 shooting guard list in a few months' time. That's
there's at least 4 players. I got a second monitor right behind this computer that I'm looking at right now. I got my laptop right here that I got the camera on. Basketball game right behind it. There is at least 4 players on that basketball court right now. Well, Paul George ain't playing, but if he was, I got OKC versus the Clippers on. Paul George, Kawhi, Shea. J-Dub might be getting there, man. J-Dub might be getting there.
Slow down a little bit.
We might be stretching it a bit here.
Hey, man. Give it 2 seasons minimum.
That's another thing. That's another thing I've been seeing recently that kind of has me mad. Paolo is still the rookie of the year. Do not get it twisted.
Yeah, this is another like Anthony Edwards to LaMelo Ball type situation. It's like Edwards had a great end of the year, but LaMelo had the better season, and it's no different this year. Like J-Dub's been great, but Paolo's the rookie of the year.
You talking about Paolo 3-point percentage? Worst 3-point percent? I don't know about that, man.
Talking about J-Dub who had 5 points last week and sold my leg. All I needed was 10.
Unselfish player, man. Unselfish player. Paolo's gonna go get you a bunch of turnovers, man.
Hey, man, he's asked to be the number 1 option.
He don't overstep his bounds, man.
He got asked to be the number 1 option from day one. Didn't even have his point guard for like the first month and a half.
Yeah, Paolo, he got that, man.
It's honestly not close, personally.
It's not. It's not at all.
It's not.
They weren't talking about J-Dub till February.
Yeah.
Like mid-February.
Yeah. And it's the same thing every year with the Rookie of the Year award or some form of rookie. Last year it was Jalen Green with getting all rookie first team. Like, it always happens. There's always some guy who gets hot mid-February, early February, and inserts himself in some type of conversation. And J-Dub has been great, and J-Dub's probably going to be second on my ballot, but Paolo's number 1, and that's pretty clear.
They will speak about next year's Rookie of the Year race and Legend, man. As long as both of them play, Victor versus Chet, they're going to speak about that in Legend.
We got Vic, Chet, Brandon Miller's getting a bunch of hype. Scoop, maybe, could be have a very nice rookie year. Like, whoop. It's going to be some guys on that ballot.
Hey, rookies this year, we not going to talk about him today. But shout out to Jabari Smith. He's been pretty decent recently, a lot better than having his best stretch of the season late, and the Rockets have won a little bit more, notably give the Lakers that upset. So they aren't rolling over even this late into the season as bad as they were. So while we're talking about rookies, I'll throw that out there.
Ochai Agbaji been playing very solid basketball, man.
Yeah, definitely. I swear I'm tweeting about him every week at this rate. He's been playing really well.
Yes.
Hour 40 in. Do we want to do the West now, or do we want to leave the West for next week?
Let's just do it, man. Let's get it going. Let's get it going.
Let's do it. Okay, I'm with it. We'll start with the Nuggets, Gabe. Who's your X factor for the Nuggets?
Pretty simple. Jamal Murray. Came off those injuries back this season. Probably still their second best player, but it's a little bit closer now than it probably was before the injuries. But this is a guy who when they made their last conference finals run, was averaging damn near like 50 for a couple games stretching a playoff series, and I think averaged over 35 for the playoff series. So special talent, especially elevating in the postseason like that. If he can be anywhere close to that guy, maybe they can go back there. I know Jokic is a much better player than he was in that year, but still, looking at it from the outside, his offensive production is probably going to have to go crazy for them to go far, because if this defense is as exposable as we think it is, things might not look so good if he plays poorly. But I will give you the caveat of this team, their defense kind of as a whole is really the X factor, and it's more specifically defending the paint. When I made my list, I just didn't do any like conceptual or like groups things. I did make it all like a player. But if I would have gone back and revised my list with like conceptual stuff like that, there is a good chance I just said paint defense.
You could have said that and nobody would have batted an eye, honestly. But you could go for a team that's a 1 seed, you could go so many different directions with what is the X factor. I do agree with Gabe though, because like we discussed earlier, we know what Jokic is going to bring to the table, but without some elite level perimeter play, and that starts with Jamal Murray, this team's not going to be a serious contender. So Jamal Murray has to be able to elevate his game, which is asking a lot because he hasn't played playoff basketball since the bubble.
Definitely some good picks. And like you say, Gabe, Jamal Murray's arguably been their second best player. He has to undoubtedly be their second best player for them to have any chance, because Aaron Gordon's been arguably their second best player at times this year, and that's just not going to lead to any success for them. I went with the paint defense as the pick because it's a concern, and the defense has shown flashes of being decent this year, and obviously recently it's very much not been that, and if that's going to be the case come playoff time, they're going to struggle. They're going to need that to pick up a bit more if they're going to have any level of success. Moving on to the Sacramento Kings. Tyrik, who is your X factor for the Kings this postseason?
Go a lot of different ways, man. A lot of different ways. I'm going to go with, I think Harrison Barnes is going to be kind of sneaky, man. I think that's a sneaky guy that if he's hitting the shots, playing like really good defense, that could be a difference maker for them in the first round series, because he's their vet. Like, he has the most playoff experience on this team, which is saying a lot because he hasn't been to the playoffs in a while. But he has an NBA Finals run under his belt, so he's played in high pressure situations. So if he's able to consistently hit his 3-point shot, really keep this team steady, I think that would be one of their X factors. But you can go a lot of different directions with this team as well. Like, you could, if you said Sabonis or just Fox just being elite, like, that's good enough for me, honestly.
I do agree with the fact that there are a ton of different directions with this team. And that's why I kind of gave a pick that was probably catering to the way some of the fan base feels right now, because I did read the comments on our video that blew up about the Sacramento Kings. And, we talk a lot about offense, but this team didn't really have a lot going on defense. And they made an acquisition and have a guy who's now been in the starting lineup for a while, who a lot of the Kings fandom is saying has been really nice for their defense, especially on that perimeter towards that wing area. That's Kessler Edwards, man. I think they just have so much offensive firepower that I think they're going to get it done. Hey, if Kessler Edwards can come in and play some good defense and just slow down the other team's best player a little bit, going to be incredibly vital to them if they're going into a first-round matchup with like a Warriors or something.
Very good pick. I did not think someone else was going to join me on the Kessler Edwards pick, but I definitely like it. Like you say, if he can come in and give you 15 and 20 a night of just good defense, come in and hit a 3 or 2, that's going to be really important for them. If their defense can just be good enough, like you say, they have a ton of offensive pieces. They're going to get it done on that end of the floor. Moving on to the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll start with you, Gabe. Who is your pick for the Grizzlies X Factor this postseason?
I went with Jaren Jackson, specifically for the fact that he controls the destiny of their entire defense, for lack of a better term. Jaren Jackson came in, and I talked about it earlier with kind of the Defensive Player of the Year thing, but for this going on to YouTube, it'll probably be its own video, so I guess I can explain at least briefly that they went from a whatever defense to a top 3 defense with the introduction of Jaren Jackson after he came back from his injury early in the season. With that said, I feel like their offense, well led by Ja and secondarily by Desmond Bane, they have it pretty spread out. They have a lot of guys that can really punish you. They have a lot of solid depth pieces, even if some have gotten injured. But on that other side of the floor, it really does run through Jaren. Whether that's the guy who's ripping the ball away from the other team, whether that's the guy who's blocking the shot at the rim, whether that's the guy who's playing good in the pick and roll, whether that's the guy who's switching, just being that extra help guy in the paint. He's versatile, man. He can do a lot of things for your roster. He can do a lot of things for your defense. Only thing that might stop him is that foul trouble, and that's what might make him a bit of an X factor. I think he's been a lot better about it this season. But playoff-wise, maybe you see that come up again, especially if they play a familiar opponent who's kind of exposed that in the past. So as long as he stays out of foul trouble, I think he'll be very good. But what he does is so impactful that he's going to have to keep doing that for them to really succeed.
Good pick. Desmond Bane. I think he has to be that real secondary playoff option. We've been seeing it all season from him. He's even been able to step in when Ja's been out, but he needs to really be a consistent second option for this team. Like, giving him maybe 20 a night every single playoff game, maybe even more. Like, he has to be that undoubtedly number 2 guy for them.
Definitely some very good picks. I went with a bit of a different direction here. Someone's got to replace the minutes and the value of Brandon Clark on last year's playoff run, so I went with Santi Aldama here. His defense is going to be important. His rebounding is going to be important, especially depending on how available Steven Adams is come the postseason. And his three-point shooting is going to be really important too. Now, they have been shooting a lot better from three-point range since the deadline, since the acquisition of Luke Kennard. Once that bench unit starts to come in, there's pretty much always one of Conchar or Kennard on the court, which has helped their three-point shooting. But Aldama is a really important part of their three-point shooting too. And with BC out, as valuable as he has been for them over the last couple of years, I think he's going to play a really important role in any success they can have this postseason.
What college did he go to?
Great question. No idea.
You wouldn't think of this school producing a black big man. You would not think of this school.
I knew he was a Gonzaga.
I was thinking about it too.
What year did he come? Did he come in Suggs' draft?
No.
Or was it
later?
A little before that. Really? I was thinking it was before that, but
I think he was 18. I think he was 18.
I feel like the Gonzaga team with Brandon Clark went far.
Or 19. One of the other. Honestly, I don't remember watching him in college.
He's pick 30, 2021 draft.
Really?
Yeah, I thought he was at least year 3. I did not think he was.
That's what I was
2.
saying, bro. I thought he was like on one of those Gonzaga teams that went hella far.
Brandon Clark, nowhere.
No, Aldama.
Okay. Maybe Gonzaga was still going far back. Again, I feel like Gonzaga was one of those teams always.
Brandon Clark was 2019.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Gonzaga like always goes far, but they just like never got it done.
I don't even know who's on that Gonzaga team, to be honest.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Drew Timme probably.
It was probably his freshman year.
4 years ago, yeah. Yeah, it would have been his freshman year. Yep. Yeah. All right, moving on to the Phoenix Suns. I'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your X factor for the Suns this postseason?
DeAndre Ayton. I mean, we talked about this a lot recently. Like, he doesn't have to be 23 and 12, but he just has to be somewhat of a post presence and really control the boards and be good, really good defensively, which is what we've seen from him before in the playoffs. We just need to be able to see it again for a full playoff run. He's the key. Obviously, Kevin being back will be major for them, but DeAndre Ayton's going to be the X factor for this team, mainly on the defensive side of the floor and just controlling the rebound battle.
Yeah, this team has a lot of really good options because everything you said about Ayton, all facts. Chris Paul also has a really good argument, I think, because of the way we've seen him elevate and especially just close out teams late in playoff games. However, I do have to go with Kevin Wayne Durant here. It's just KD, very large question marks with health, always. if Kevin Durant is playing, this team is probably the favorite to come out of this conference. If Kevin Durant is not playing, they could still win. But is anybody calling them a favorite? I don't think so. He genuinely has the most sway on a team's success that there's like a reason, like an actual reason to like be worried about that sway of probably any player in the league. Only other players who have as much sway on a team's success as KD, players of that caliber, you know they're showing up. You know Jokic is going to be there. Luka's going to be there. All those guys, Giannis is going to be there. We don't know if KD is going to be there. You never really do. You don't know what kind of shape he's going to be in. But he really takes this team from like one of the top teams in the West to a top 3 team in the league.
I think as long as he's out there, he'll be fine and they'll be fine because out of all the superstars, KD is the most plug-and-play guy maybe that we've ever seen, at least in our time. Because it doesn't matter if this man hasn't played in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. Throw him out there, he can get you 30. He's just that good.
That's why he's just got to be there, man. If he's there, this team, I picked our friendly wager. I got a draft pick riding on this. KD is my biggest X factor.
You are not wrong.
Fair.
You're not wrong. Outside of his health, which, like you say, is obviously the biggest swing factor, I went with their wing shooting. If Ish Wainwright, Torrey Craig, Josh Okogie, if those guys can show out every night and can consistently hit their threes, I mean, it's toast. Because if teams are sending help on Booker or sending help on KD, and you're getting punished by those guys hitting their threes, I mean, you just can't stop their offense at that point. You can hardly stop it at the best of times, but if those guys are doing their thing and hitting threes consistently, then there's just no shot that you're going to be able to do anything to stop them. Moving on to the LA Clippers. We will start with you, Tyrik. What is your pick for the LA Clippers X Factor this postseason?
This is Gabe's team.
It is Gabe's team. With his sixth man of the year pick.
Man.
So many different directions, man. So many different directions. This might be a cop out. I'm gonna say Russell Westbrook, man. Because the way teams have been guarding him, Ty Lue's kind of found a way to make him be somewhat effective. Use him as an on-ball screener a little more. He's been really crashing the offensive boards. Like he's been finding ways to be effective. How that translates to the postseason, I think, will be key in him being able to be on the floor for long stretches of time because he is by far the best playmaker that they have at the roster from the guard spot. So they will need his offense and what he brings to the table. It's just a matter of him being able to affect the game when teams will dare him to shoot jump shots, which so far they've been able to adjust a little bit, but how will that translate to the postseason? We will see. I think that's one of probably the biggest key for them moving forward.
I went with Paul George since he just went down in their last game. This close to the playoffs, that's a really big scare just because of like timetables. How's he going to come back? Will he be full strength? How is all that going to work out? I think that just instantly put a really, really big question mark on things. So from that perspective, I think that made the decision just a lot easier for me to say that due to that injury, he's their biggest X factor.
Definitely. Those are both really good picks. It's unfortunate that the PG has gone down. And like you say, Russ, any team Russ is on at this point in time in his career, he's going to be a really big X factor. And there's a lot of ways you can go with this team. I'm going with Marcus Morris because he's been a little bit up and down as of late. But when he's hitting and when he's locked in, he can be a really important offensive piece for this team. And especially if Paul George isn't going to be 100%, they're going to need him to be consistently hitting his shots and producing 15, 18 a night. And that just hasn't been a consistent thing right now. So I think there's a lot of volatility with that, which could play in to how much he could impact the Clippers postseason.
Clipper fans hate him.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not a Clippers fan, and I'm not really a big fan of Marcus Morris either. So I could understand him for that one. We will move on to the Dallas Mavericks. I will start with you, Gabe. Who is your X factor for the Dallas Mavericks this postseason?
I went with Josh Green. Very similar, really similar to the Kessler Edwards pick, but I think Josh Green is going to have like a bit bigger of a role to play because team's like third best player at this point, man. Basically, I mean, is it even that much of an argument? Because Christian Wood hasn't really been as good as of late. Josh Green, this team ain't got like no defense, but Josh Green does have some defense, and that instantly makes him one of the most important players on the roster. I think I'm not expecting a ton from anybody. Like, I expect a little bit from Christian Wood, so I'll say anybody like 5 through the rest of the roster. I don't really expect much from, and I think barring health, Kyrie will show up, and Luka will definitely show up. So for me, Josh Green, it's the guy.
I'm going to piggyback on that point. I'm going to add in Reggie Bullock because those are really the only two guys that they have any perimeter defense on this team. So they're gonna have to show up, and they're gonna have to be able to hit their shots in the postseason, which will be a big key because you know the attention that Kyrie and Luka is going to garner. So those guys have to be ready to knock down a lot of shots.
Definitely, those guys are crucial. I fully agree with those. Maxi Kleba can be thrown in that conversation too. My X factor here is Jason Kidd, because some of his rotations and decisions with how he's allocating his minutes lately have been suspect, to say the least, with Christian Wood's minutes, with Jaden Hardy being in and out of the lineup, with Josh Green being in and out of the lineup. Those guys need to have their role set and need to be part of this team, clearly, with how they've been playing. And Kidd hasn't shown me that he can consistently figure that out this year. And if he can't consistently figure that out, especially considering they might only have one game to get that done, considering they're in the play-in right now, he doesn't have any room for error. And the fact that he's had a lot of errors is a concerning factor for me for their postseason.
Yeah, I don't see I still don't understand why Dwight Powell gets so many minutes as much as he does. And Jaden Hardy's been really good for them. I know he doesn't really help the defensive, but when he gets on the court, he gets buckets, which you could use it off your bench. And then Josh Green, like, I feel like since the Kyrie trade, it's just been so up and down for him. Like, before the trade, he was playing so well offensively. Like, his offensive game was picking up, and he was playing the best offensive basketball of his career. And then since the trade, it's just been like, some nights, he'll get a lot of minutes, some nights he's not. It's just so inconsistent. So that's such a good pick, man, because Jason Kidd had the good first year, which he typically does, and now the second year, seeing a lot of the ups and downs coming in.
Is he just Tom Thibodeau too? Maybe.
Is he just Jason Mid? Maybe.
Sure seems like it at least, but hopefully for the Mavericks' sake, he can figure it out, whether it be in a first-round series or in the play-in tournament. We'll move on to the Golden State Warriors, and I'll ask you first, Tyrik, who is your X factor for the Golden State Warriors this postseason?
Given Andrew Wiggins probably not coming back anytime soon, so wouldn't bank on it. I'm going to go in the direction of the young guy, Jonathan Kuminga. If he can get consistent minutes in the postseason, he can maybe make up for some of that loss of Wiggins because of his athleticism, what he can provide on the defensive side of the floor. And just, I feel like when he gets minutes, he always plays so well. He just plays his role well. Obviously, the jump shot's not there, but he's smart enough to cut, find open lanes, get to the bucket. He's not gonna be Wiggins, obviously, because Wiggins was damn near a secondary shot creator for them. But he can fill in a lot of those little things that Wiggins did so well last season for them.
So I think I feel so corny for this. My X factor for the Golden State Warriors is actually Eric Hausen because he controls their travel arrangements. And whoever's controlling their travel arrangements, what the hell is going on with this team on the road? Alternatively, you could say my X factor is the team playing because this team is like perfectly fine if they're playing in San Francisco. But the second they leave the Bay Area, they suddenly go from the 73-9 Warriors to the 10-72 Philadelphia 76ers. Like, I really just don't understand how a team can be that different. I know a road environment is much more difficult, but most of these players are seasoned professionals. Most of them have won a championship because they won it last year. So that's like most of the roster. I don't understand. I just don't get it. I probably never will get it. But it's got to just be road play. That's the X factor. Can they win a game on the road? Because we know in any game, they're probably not going to have home court advantage. So any series they're in, those 3 games, the Chase Center probably wins. They just got to steal home court.
Yeah, if those guys can figure out how to run on the road, they're chilling. But, man, definitely an anomaly of a season for them in that regard. My pick here is going to be Gary Payton. Looks like he's going to be gearing up to play pretty darn soon. And their biggest problem on the road is they can't defend at all. And if they can figure out how to defend a little bit more, which Gary Payton is going to be a very big part of, they might have a chance. So making sure that he is healthy, that he is ready to give you 15, 20, 25 a night, and is playing at a high level could end up being the biggest swing factor, because their biggest swing factor is road play, and he might be the biggest piece that can impact whether they can actually steal a game on the road.
After Poole, it should be Gary Payton and Kuminga. Those should be the next 2 guys off the bench. Don't give Anthony Lamb minutes.
No.
The fans don't like him. He kind of stinks. Don't give him minutes. He's not a good person. Just don't give him minutes.
Truth to that. Moving on to the Oklahoma City Thunder. I will start with you, Gabe. Who is your X factor for OKC this postseason?
Gotta be J-Dub. It's gotta be J-Dub. This team was like hovering around that area. A little bit under 500 in the mix, but not really like just a tiny bit below the pack. But over the last like month and a half, he's really came up. And at the same time, this team is finally like at 500 and they're up there at like the top of the plane instead of the bottom. Like they look quite good. There's a lot of directions you could go with this team as well. Just with so many young guys, there's bound to be a ton of volatility. Their experience could be the thing to bite them. And you could probably say the lack of experience could be the X factor itself. But if I'm going to go with anybody, it's the guy who's been showing out lately, because if he can keep this up, it gives them a much better chance.
Yeah, you could say almost anything about this team, and you could make a compelling case. I'm going to go Lou Dort, mainly because I want to see his impact. Given they say they do make the postseason, him guarding the other team's best perimeter player. I want to see how difficult he can make it on that opposing player and maybe somewhat shift the series. I think that could be very interesting to watch if we get that opportunity to see.
No, definitely be very fun, especially when you get in situations where a guy as elite as he is defensively gets the game plan for a star on the opposing team day after day after day over the course of multiple weeks. Definitely going to make for a very fun battle. I went with J-Dub here as well. I mean, we talked about it earlier, the volatility of him dropping 25 one night and 5 the other. He's going to be really important for how he ends up swinging things for OKC in the postseason. Moving on to the Minnesota Timberwolves. They just got Cat back. I'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your pick for the X factor for the Minnesota Timberwolves this postseason?
I think you just said it. It might be a cop-out, but I think it's Cat. I mean, with him coming back so late, if he's able to gel, can make them maybe scary if they do. Not scary, but they could give somebody a run if they do get in. If it looks as poor as it did early on in the season, that could be the reason why they might miss the playoffs altogether. Like, they might get bounced in the play-in. Like, it's such an up-and-down type of scenario. That's like the ultimate X factor, so it has to be Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah, the main thing I have written down is just star health, because Cat just coming back, that's one thing, but then also Anthony Edwards is out, and so he should be coming back in the next couple of games, and now they're both going to be kind of freshly back, and especially freshly back together, because once Ant comes back, it'll be their first game together since like November. So there's a lot of figuring out to do there, because this roster, the Rudy Gobert Timberwolves, they ain't really played together much, and they haven't played together since November, and the season started in October. So they had probably under a month of time playing together total, and now they're expected to go into like must-win games.
And they've made trades.
The chemistry of the stars here is of the utmost importance and probably the biggest thing for this team.
Definitely. I would agree with that. I also want to mention and in part shout out to Jaden McDaniels as well. He's been playing some great basketball as of late. Been great defensively all year, but on the offensive end is starting to take a bit of a step over the last couple of weeks. And if he can continue to show that level of offensive production, that could be a really big swing factor for them as well. Moving on to the LA Lakers. Got a bit of an update today as we're recording this on the 23rd of March on LeBron's injury today. Still waiting to see exactly when he'll come back, but it's clear at this point that he's not going to be back until at the very earliest, the back end of the regular season. We'll start with you, Tyrik. Who is your X factor for the LA Lakers this postseason?
I think LeBron also said those reports were cat.
That could be true.
I think
that could be true.
Which is crazy because I think Shams reported it. I'm like, Shams washed. Yeah, I'm digging back into the Anthony Davis well. AD got to continue to be elite. If he's still playing elite basketball, that gives him a chance. But, if not, or if he is not on the court because of health reasons, that obviously derails them a big ton. So AD is always the X factor for the Lakers for me personally.
It's got to be 3-6 Mafia, man. 3 and 6. AD, LeBron, both of them. AD, we know he's always that X factor of can he be the AD in the bubble or is he going to be the AD the year and a half after? Whichever one he is drastically changes how good this team can be. But then also, when you got LeBron, who's literally just about to come off an injury right before the playoffs start, barely got time to play with all their new acquisitions. I like all the new acquisitions. I think most of them have been pretty dang consistent. Austin Reeves has been hooping since LeBron's been out. Like, there are other guys. This is the least amount of questions I've had about the others in a long time for this team. Which, yeah, there's going to be some guys that are up and down. Like, Malik Beasley will be better some nights than others. D'Lo will be better some nights than others. But when you're one of the others, I think that's really just a part of the game. Every night is not going to be your night. LeBron and AD are really the ones that it's really gonna come down on because you have a supporting cast now. Now it's LeBron who's the health thing, which he's had some bigger injuries, but usually health is all about AD. AD's been there recently. That him sitting against the Rockets was but that was more of they don't want him to play back-to-backs and he's hurt in this game. So his health has been pretty good recently, but the duos they've got to come through. They've got to come through here. It's on them.
Definitely. I mean, as with any team, the stars of the Lakers are going to be really important. I'm going to go with D'Angelo Russell here because every team needs a solid guard, and he's looked really good since he's come in. And even if LeBron and AD are healthy, they're going to need someone who's going to run a bit of their offense, even though LeBron's going to run part of it as he always does. D'Angelo Russell's going to have to be responsible for some of that. And they might need him to hit some big shots down the stretch of some games. Even though he's not the guy or even the number 2 guy, that number 1 lead guard is going to get relied on come any type of postseason play. And D'Angelo Russell is going to have to show up and make some shots for them to be able to have any level of success.
Good pick.
Moving on to the 2 teams currently outside of the play-in tournament, we will start with the Utah Jazz. Gabe, who was your pick for the Utah Jazz X Factor this postseason?
I went by Jordan Clarkson. I, at this point, do not think that Utah will get in. But if they do get in, it's always that archetype of player to me. That player who's 6-man, comes off the bench, electric scorer, those microwave guys. I feel like they're always the ones who, once it comes playoff time, a lot of times they kind of flame out and just are not the same player, just significantly less valuable. And if this Utah team wants a chance to really make some noise, they cannot afford to have that happen. I think he's just too kind of valuable to what the team does right now. And to even be this far, if he falls off like players of that mold typically do, it's done for them.
Given who's been playing recently, I'm going to go with THT. Don't really got too much to say. I agree with Gabe. I don't think they're getting in, which is not really a disappointment, looking, complete surface level. But I don't know. THT can have some big games down the stretch. Maybe he can increase their chances of maybe getting in. But we all kind of agree it's more unlikely that they make it into the play.
For sure. Definitely good picks. I went similar to you, Gabe. I said a combination of Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson. Are they in the lineup? Because they both haven't been in the lineup. over the last couple of weeks, and B, if they are in the lineup, they have that type of volatility where they could both drop 8 on terrible efficiency, but they could also both drop 25. And that's the type of volatility that is going to decide whether Utah can get in, and then from there, whether they can get themselves through the play-in tournament. Finally, for the Pelicans, I'd imagine we all have a pretty similar mindset here as to how they'll actually be able to have a bit of a swing for an X factor, but I'll still ask the question, who's your X factor for the New Orleans Pelicans, Gabe?
So I do actually have a name written down, but
Wow.
the elephant in the room is Zion get healthy. Last year they didn't have him go to the playoffs, have a competitive first round matchup against a team that flamed out, but a team that was the best regular season team in the league. Come around this year, playing so well, 1 seed, Zion goes down, they've fallen off this hard. I still like the coaching they got over there. Still like the roster they got over there. A lot of good supporting pieces. Zion get healthy. For me, the name I wrote down that's actually there's a chance. I wrote down Trey Murphy just because I've seen some really big flashes out of him this season, some really good moments. So dang near more of a shout out than he's going to change the whole season because he's been hooping, but it's get healthy.
Yeah, that was a player I have written down too. I mean, because we saw Trey Murphy in the play-in last year have a big-time performance. I think it was the fourth quarter where he just was lights out. So he has that type of volatility to where he can really light it up. We've seen him have some big scoring games this season too. Really has stepped up his play. So if they can get some of that down the stretch and maybe sneak into the play-in, he can have a game or a stretch where he really can change a game. So Trey Murphy, but like Gabe said, Zion get healthy. I think they said he's getting reevaluated in 2 weeks, which by then, will pretty much be around play-in territory. So it's not really a great sign, but it's something, I guess.
Hey, they're tied with the 10 seed right now and the 9 seed. All they got to do is get in. If Zion can be there, who knows, man?